screen up and running here.
Okay. And it's working.
Okay, let's get the slideshow from the beginning.
All right.
There, does that look good to everyone?
Looks
Perfect.
great. Thank you.
Okay, let me move these. Now, I cannot see the chat. So, Deborah, if you'll be so kind as to, if there are any questions raised in the chat, you can sure chime in and ask me about it, or we can save questions till the end, whatever you feel most comfortable with.
Oh, we'll just take them as they come.
Okay.
However. Okay.
Well, I would really like to thank Deborah for inviting me to share today. And I want to begin by saying that every AARP state is different. I'm from Montana, and we have vast geography full of small rural communities. Even our big cities, what we consider our big cities, are considered rural by many measures. And Montana is actually classified as a frontier state. So we have a small state staff in Montana, only 5 of us. And I'm sharing this with you as my kickoff because I think it's important to know that state offices are structured differently and they have different priorities. So in Montana, I'm going to share what works for us in Montana and how we structure our rural engagement. But I do want to caution you that our successes may not work in other states. So you can take uh, grains of salt out of what I present today and think about how that will work in your own state or your own community. So it's the same old problem. Isn't that the truth? It can be awfully tricky when you're trying to connect with volunteers in rural areas. Do you plan the activity in a community and hope the right people attend and that they'll be interested in becoming volunteers? Or do you recruit volunteers first and then plan activities so that you can engage them? Uh, it is always really quite a question. And in Montana, we've tried it both ways and found that either way works occasionally, but it's almost impossible to keep rural volunteers engaged if they have to wait for AARP staff to continually plan activities in their rural communities across the state. I mean, we could be talking about 20 different communities, plus the other work that our small staff has to do. We just can't be constantly planning and implementing events simultaneously around the state. So we have found that we need to incentivize our rural volunteers to find ways to incorporate AARP into their existing community events. And we do that by offering financial support activities, by financially supporting activities in those rural communities. And we do that in a couple of ways. So I have found success by connecting with people that are already engaged in the community. That's where we're going to draw our great community ambassador volunteers. So we begin by developing community relationships with organizations. And it's worked for us, but it's been a slow success because, relation building takes time and you date someone for a while before you really decide to go out on a regular basis or before you decide to get married. So we court these different community organizations and see where we can find synergy with what AARP's goals are and what their goals are and how we can work together. So once we begin to develop that relationship with the community organizations, then we have an opportunity to ask them to connect us with people in their organization that might be aligned with the AARP or interested in the types of work that we have available. And some of the community groups that we have found to be successful we've got a very close relationship with our retired educators. The Montana Retired Educators Unit members work with us. They're executive executive director sits on our executive council, and we work very closely together. We also work closely with the area agency on aging staff and volunteers. We've tried to develop relationships with libraries across the state, staff and volunteers. We do a lot of collaborating with our extension agents. They are key players in small communities, and we have found that this is a great entree into some of those communities. And we really leverage our community challenge recipients, the grant recipients. They're doing projects around the state, and we've given them money and we've helped their project to come alive. So we can see that we already have things in common. And also, don't forget about those Andrus Award nominees or nominators. We solicit Andrus nominations from community groups around Montana, and we get 10 to 20, maybe sometimes as many as 30, and many of those are new organizations to us. So we recognize their volunteers, we appreciate their volunteers, and that helps us again to develop some of those relationships that will lead us into a volunteer situation. So we call our volunteers in rural communities, really outside of our target communities, we call them our community ambassadors. And their job duties are very simple and they're very straightforward. They can be as limited or as expansive as the volunteer wants to make them. We ask them to represent AARP at local events and exhibit tables. The easy entry piece to the volunteer ambassador position is just to provide AARP publications to senior centers, libraries, doctors' offices, wherever people gather. We'll provide a rack if they'd like it, and then the volunteer can make sure that those pubs stay current and can start to form a relationship with those places where we have those pubs. We offer issue training to our community ambassador volunteers, and they're always included in our annual volunteer summit. So we have a smattering of community ambassador volunteers around the state. And I'd like to refer back to one of the questions, the first question actually, that Deborah posed in her invitation to today's event. Where are we with having enough volunteers for an in-person event in all communities? Well, in a state like Montana, that's an impossible goal. We can never have a team of volunteers in every community that is sustainable. But what we can have is people that have passion, whose goals align with ours, who are interested in the same issues that we have. And we have put the volunteer, the community ambassador volunteer, into the driver's seat and let them take us where their community really needs to go, with offering them support from AARP. So that has helped us to come much closer to achieving that balance that we all hope for, is volunteers in the right place with things to do, feeling empowered, the ability to connect to groups in their communities. It's an important balance to try to find. So along with this, we've developed a list of activities that we call our community buffet of ideas, of a way that a volunteer can engage in their community. And we've got a series of buffet. I was in Nevada for a while, so that's where the term buffet comes from, I guess, from my work in Las Vegas. But they're really just a jumping off point, trying to give the volunteers in their own community a way to internalize what was possible. We offered to pay and support for the activities that they came up with. But the trick is that they needed to have the idea. They needed to implement the program without staff assistance from our state office. And we found that that wasn't really all that successful. We kept recruiting new volunteer ambassadors and we would send them the buffet. And if I asked them specifically to do something, they were more than happy to do it. But we didn't get a lot of them taking the initiative by doing it this way. So we put our heads together and tried to think of what could incentivize the volunteers. And we realized that everybody has kind of a passion. You're involved with AARP because you have a passion around fraud or around caregiving or making sure that we're financially solvent in our retirement years or whatever it is that is your personal hook that draws you to AARP. We want to help you bring a passion project into your community. And so, before I talk too much about our mini grants, that's a second program that we implemented. I want to show you some of the examples of projects that were on our buffet of activities. So, as I said, I always lead with the take your publications to community outlets because it's an easy entry volunteer activity. Um, but they could recognize local volunteers during volunteer week, and we could give them $100 that they could put credits at the local coffee shop and then invite organizations to send their outstanding volunteers down and have a cup of coffee on AARP. Or you could organize a food drive or a pet food drive. Share information about upcoming virtual activities. I know that all of us AARP state offices are offering a whole slate of virtual activities these days. And so, you could utilize the library and talk to the librarian and maybe host one of the webinars that's being offered in the library in a meeting room, invite people to come in, provide some snacks. It would be a really great way to start discussion about AARP activities. Or even, some of those virtual activities are exercise classes or meditation. There's such a broad variety of activities right now offered from state offices across the nation. We also have what we call Teletown Hall Tuesdays. So on the third Tuesday of every month, we host a telephone town hall. That's where we call out to all of our members across the state, quite frankly. And we have a great following from our rural communities because they can connect with us once a month. We bring in a guest presenter. One month, the topic might be brain health. The next month, it's fraud. The next month, we're coming up with an estate planning topic this month. So I moderate those calls and we have a script that's already written out where the guest knows what I'm going to ask them. So there's no surprises and they're able to be comfortable, and it's audio only. So in a state like Montana, where we are towards the bottom with our broadband access, these telephone town halls really do help us to connect to people who are not digitally connected. And they also provide an opportunity to bring people together at the senior center or at a library or, at the extension office, somewhere where they can gather together to participate virtually if there are not in-person activities. You can make something an in-person activity. Start a walking program. So I mentioned that we were having a hard time getting our community ambassador volunteers to take initiative and implement. I mean, that buffet of activities is about 5 pages long. We have lots of activities under every issue area. So we thought we were really handing them, a menu that they could choose from and just run with. But they wanted us to kind of give them more guidance until we tapped into their passion. So we offer our community ambassadors the opportunity to apply to us each year for a $1,000 mini grant. The mini grant needs to be tied. It needs to benefit the 50 plus. It needs to be tied to one of the issues that we work on in Montana: fraud, caregiving, financial security, access to health care, livable communities. Or it needs to be tied to one of the 8 domains of livability, because we're all, engaged in that. And what small community couldn't benefit from a little project around something like that? So we get many volunteers that have taken us up on those offers. And they have now become evangelists for AARP. It's deepened their engagement in the community. The community sees an investment from AARP. In a small community, $1,000 can really go a long way on a project. But recognize that, I told you about our landscape here in Montana. We're a frontier state. We have vast geography. It can take us, 6 hours to drive to the eastern part of the state from our state office. And so money we would spend being out on the road, we would rather put into the hands of a volunteer for a project to make an impact in their community. And these are some of the examples of community mini grants that came to us from volunteers. Children's books to help guide kids through the Alzheimer's and dementia journey for their grandparents or their parents. World Elder Abuse Awareness Day, so fraud prevention and elder abuse prevention. Fruit trees in community gardens, not just peas and lettuce and corn, but fruit trees that will bear fruit year after year. Museum display cases, fraud summit or shredding events, cameras and books for a veterans camp that's up in the Flathead, large print books in a local library, all really connected to AARP's work. We didn't tell them what we wanted them to do. We gave them, we empowered them to tell us what they wanted to do in their community. And if they need to pull together a little team, that's great. They begin as an episodic team helping with a project. If that team decides they want to come together and start to be a regular AARP volunteer team, all the better. But if not, we still have that volunteer, the community ambassador that we're connected with, that we keep informed about our projects and our issues. We keep them trained and we offer support as we move forward. We also pull them into any community relationships that we might build. We've recently started also working with our extension office. And in Montana, the extension office has a community vitality group, which works specifically in rural areas. They've got a program called Reimagining Rural, and they take 5 or 6 rural communities each year, and they give them some seed money for a project in their community, and they pull off a project where they do leadership training and development. And so it's such a great program. But once a community's gone through the program, then they're kind of on their own. So we said, let's see if we can work with Extension and help reinvigorate some of those alumni communities. So we've got a pilot project going this year where we offered to fund 10, although we funded 11, mini grants that came from community groups, from Reimagining Rural alumni communities that we're now going to be forming new relationships with. We're giving them $1,000 and supporting a project in their town or in their area. And they're the movers and shakers in their community. We're hopeful that they are going to become community ambassadors for us in those communities, or that someone in their group will be, because that's the goal, to try to build that capacity out to help us to have increased reach and work together with local community groups. So in conclusion, cold in this picture. It was a silly wintertime event, 25 below zero. I had to call all the volunteers and tell them not to come. It was too darn cold. But in Montana, we're investing in rural communities. We begin by collaborating in a community whenever possible, and we're always on the lookout for new connections, libraries, extension agents, agencies on aging, challenge grant applicants, these new Reimagining Rural grant recipients. Our state office also funds usually between 5 and 6 additional challenge grants every year. We wait until the national office has funded the grants that they choose, and then we fund, 5 or 6 other projects around the state at lower amounts, so that we can begin to spread that impact from AARP statewide. We're also working with the Montana Arts Council. They've begun a program called Creative Aging. And so there's a convening next month that we'll be going to. Those activities occur largely in rural areas. They're trying to figure out how to infuse arts into rural communities. And that's right in line with some of what we're trying to do. It's all brain health, it's social engagement. So
Great.
we try to find a person who aligns with us, an organization where we have synergy, and see if we can hold hands and work together and create a network of volunteers.
Great. Thank you so much, Nancy, for this presentation. And we have a couple of questions already. One is from Miss Linda. And would you like to go on and just say your question, please?
Yeah, thank you so much for this presentation, Nancy. It was fabulous. You mentioned you have a small staff, and I was curious as to who in your office trains and recruits your community ambassadors.
I'm the outreach director. I'm the outreach ASD. I manage the volunteer program throughout the state. I do the training of volunteers, I do the recruiting, and I also do the implementation of programs and activities in communities throughout the state, as well as in our target community.
Wow, I hope you have an electric vehicle.
Well, we're trying to do it a little bit more virtually these days so that we're not, wasting 6 hours, a 12-hour trip, 6 hours each way to convene a group of 6 people in Rudyard, Montana, but rather we can connect to them through our telephone town halls or a local community ambassador. They can go to the library and participate virtually. So some of what our goal is.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, our next question looks as though it's coming from Valley Bunton. Would you like to, you're off mute? Yes.
Yes, I am. Thank you so much for the presentation. I really appreciate it. It really echoes, I think, probably what happens in rural as well as urban areas. I'm sure we have a lot of things in common with that. I was particularly interested in the mini grant idea. And my question was, how many dollars do you disperse each year for the mini grant program that you talk about?
We usually try to budget about $20,000 for the mini grants. Sometimes we don't get requests for $20,000, that we don't get requests from 20 volunteers. So, then we'll be checking with them. It used to be that their requests all came in at the end of the year. So we flipped that script a little bit and started asking early within the first quarter, hey, start thinking about your mini grant ideas and get those applications into us. It's a very simple process. It's an email. They say what they want to do, where they want to do it, who's going to be the nonprofit or government entity that will be the fiscal agent, and what's their outreach plan, what's their implementation plan. So really a 2-paragraph email is all it takes. And We turn down very few. A few of them don't have that dotted line or even a straight line to AARP. And we'll have to say, now remember, we're AARP, so we're funding things that are connected with our issues. We do make an exception with our retired educators. If they're reaching out to do something in the educational community, we help to fund their projects in a school setting as opposed to the 50+ setting, because it seems appropriate.
Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Dr. Mary, it looks like you've got your hand up.
Yes, and I just wanted to thank Nancy for such a comprehensive body of work, and it's a lot of work. And I know that several people have already commended you, but it just amazing. One of the things I wanted to ask was in the easy entry roles that you have some volunteers taking brochures and things to various locations. I know with us being encouraged to push digital connection, and I know in Montana that may be challenging in some areas.
It'll be a little slower coming.
What particular brochures do you have them distribute? And if you could just talk about those brochures.
Yeah, well, I kind of have what I consider in my head a brain folder or a starter pack. And it includes, the really basic, the prepare to care, the fraud information. I've now added a couple of the veterans pieces because that's so important in our rural work. We have a piece that we develop here in Montana. There's, of course, such a great menu of issues that AARP works on, and each state has to prioritize and choose their issues. So I provide them with that publication. It tells what we do in Montana, including tax aid and driver safety, what the foundation does. And the beauty of that piece is on the back flap, it has a little form they can fill out if they're interested in volunteering. And if they rip it off, on the other side of it is our mailing address. So if they're analog and they want to just mail it to me, I get them in the mail, or it includes my email address as well, so they can just let me know that they're interested. But that's kind of the basic starter pack. And then if a community, I also include a livable community piece about the 8 domains and what is livability, that just one little flyer. And then the volunteer can see where the interest is in their community. And that's a great entree to start conversations with groups.
Great, thank you. I'm sure that helps others in the group to know more information that can be shared in rural areas as well.
Yeah, and I just go into fulfillment when I get a new volunteer, and I order 5 of each of those documents, and I have them shipped directly to the volunteer. There was a time where I tried to package them myself, and all of that just takes time. So anything I can do to streamline the process so that we can get the material in the hands of the volunteers is better.
And that's a helpful tip too. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah, Nancy and Mary, we have Will Stoner on with us from OVE, and he's put a comment in the chat. But Will, do you want to come off mute and talk just briefly about that?
Sure, thanks. Nancy, great presentation, and so great. In fact, we actually have replicated that work, and that's what I was putting in chat. We love that approach. A few dollars, as you had stated, really does go a long way with some of these community partners. And North Carolina was eager to test it out and found 12 community partners between their coastal communities and their mountain communities who are interested in receiving a few dollars to do some work. And there was a small component to not only increasing our presence, but also creating potential volunteer opportunities. So I would just make a pitch if this sounds of interest to anybody and they're interested in finding a way to get a few additional dollars to do some strategic outreach in rural communities. we would be interested in offering a few dollars. And I also love the NRTA approach, or the retired educators. It makes it so much easier to give the money. So
Yeah.
we've kept it, yeah, we've kept it around $1,000, but we'd be willing to do like 1,000 to 3,000 for a project. And we have a system that has made it really easy on the state office, where thankfully our team member, Steph Gavin, if you've ever worked with her, she's amazing. She does all the paperwork. She takes care of it. All she needs is a little bit of
Nice.
information about the group. So if you're interested, you can shoot me an email. I'll put my contact information in chat, but it's wstoner@arp.org. And thanks again, Nancy, for paving the way. It's great to follow up on the heels of a great project that has demonstrated some success. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and we started out at offering $500 in support. And I think it was during the pandemic where we thought, well, we're not going anywhere. Why don't we just boost this up a little bit? That's also when we began funding challenge grants from our state budget as well, in smaller increments, in less sexy projects, that didn't attract the interest of the national office, but that really could help us to impact areas. And we look at areas where we've got advocacy needs as well. If we know we've got an important legislator in a particular small community, that makes that community a little bit more attractive for us to invest in.
That's great. And yeah, one last thing I would say too is the scrutiny is it's very low. So we would put it back on the individual staff or volunteers in that community. If you feel that it would add value, that community partner would help you increase your presence, or has a great project and is doing good work that you want to support, that's the threshold, to be honest. There's no like high hurdles or high jumping to do. It's, if you think it's going to add value to your work and help you show up better, and build a relationship with a new partner or strengthen a relationship, that's really the threshold. We want to make sure that you have the support you need to do that. So keep that in mind. And thanks
We're
again.
really excited about this new pilot that we're testing right now with the extension offices. Excuse me. And we offered 10 grants. Didn't know if we would even get 10 applications, no idea. We got 25 applications, and we ended up funding 11 choices, different communities. But one community is going to have a bike day, where they're just going to be out in the community biking, and we'll support that with our new bike audit materials from Livable Communities. There's a history walk signage program in Baker, Montana, benches near some of their fitness trails. Electricity and a water spigot in a park where they have their farmers markets or their community gatherings, makes a big difference if they can plug in a microphone in that area. A water tank to maintain flowers that were added in the downtown area that rolls down because their truck always broke down that had the water in it. So impactful projects that were designed by the community members. And we're really hoping at the end of this year that we have expanded our volunteer reach because of these investments in rural communities. They're the people that are engaged in their small communities and that are making things happen. So why not have AARP be a part of that?
Great. Thank you, Nancy, for your presentation. And I just want people to know we will be, I think, sharing your presentation, at least putting it on the portal for the exchange. And, of course, the recording for this. We had a few more questions planned, but Dr. Mary, do you want to start with these now?
Sure. And a wonderful segue, because Nancy has certainly given us examples of how she engages volunteers in Montana. And it sounds like she has a very active and committed volunteer cadre. So my questions, I put them in the chat as well, is what are you doing to make sure that your volunteers feel a part of your organization? And what I liked about what Nancy said is by referring to them as community ambassadors and giving these easy entry roles that is simply just dropping information off, provides volunteers an opportunity to step in and figure out how they want to be further engaged. So I know that we have examples in the room of things similar to that. And do you ask your volunteers to help other volunteers? So does anybody want to respond to those first two questions? I know there's wonderful examples. And, although we started out talking about rural, we're talking about all communities now. And as Will indicated, rural strategies are transferable to all communities. So let's hear what some strategies are going on in any community. And I see Mary unmuted. I'm always looking for her or Linda to start the conversation. So take it away, Mary.
Well, okay. I recently, because I'm a firm believer that if a volunteer is interested in something, that they're gonna go for it, go for gusto. So for this summer, in addition to doing, our ice cream nights, we have various towns around our area, including the city that we live in, that have summer concerts. And we did pre-pandemic go to one of the local parks, and we would have a table there on their Sunday concerts. So I thought I would try to see if I could revive it. And I kind of tossed out the idea, and people came up, well, this town has a concert, that town has I said, well, can you check into it? And believe me, it's really, we will have a lot of concerts this summer, and AARP will have a presence. So it's just one of the things that we started. And I do, again, with my movies for grownups, because everybody wants to be part of the movies. I generally have the more experienced volunteers work with the newer volunteers, in the different roles and helping people to get involved. And the biggest thing too is to make sure that they're engaging with the public. So when they're standing in line for their ice cream or for their movie, I actually have asked volunteers if they could start, walking and greeting people and welcoming them and start to talk about different things that we're doing. So that's where we're at this summer.
Sounds good. And sounds like if you want to go to some concerts, head to New Hampshire. Anyone else? Ideas that make your volunteers feel a part of your organization? Linda?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Mary a question too about the sorts of things you would have at your table. So you're going to be tabling at a concert. What sorts of materials do you have there for educating the public regarding AARP and opportunities? And do you find that folks really want to engage with you, or are they just looking to pick something up that they can take away?
We have little games that we play. We've got like a spin the wheel, and you win a prize, but it usually has an educational purpose. There's educational material, and we kind of gear it either like, okay, it maybe we talk a little bit or have some information about Social Security. We have that Plinko game. It could be something on caregiving. So it's just something that's light enough, but is relevant to what the population is at that particular event.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Yeah. And the reason to, yes, we're having a lot of concerts, but it's also because these volunteers have gone to check with the various Parks and Recreation Department. We even have a group that has connected with our local Parks and Rec to just have a table at one of their walks once a month where they just hand out water and granola bars. And of course, it has AARP stamped on it, and it has the tablecloth. But these are things that the volunteers are interested in. So it's just our way of keeping them engaged. And I find if I give them a little bit of ownership and let them feel like it's their own, they feel like, you know, they're managing it, and they really do take a lot of pride in what they're doing.
And I think that's a wonderful way to engage volunteers. Thank you both. We see Nancy in Montana, they're sponsoring history walks. Nancy, do you want to come off mute and say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, last year we sponsored the history walks, and our sponsorship included just them offering people 50 plus a half price ticket. So this year we're getting our own private history walk that we're able to invite the community to. But I love the idea. They said, you know, each year we need to train new tour guides. And so would your volunteers be interested in participating on the different walks as we train our new tour guides so they can get their spiel down? And our volunteers are thrilled about it. It's going to start in a couple of weeks. I think I had like 20 volunteers here in Helena sign up to be guinea pig attendees while the new tour guides were learning their craft. It costs about $10 at the senior rate for them to take these tours. And Helena is a very historic community, so they're pretty excited about that. That's one way that we've connected the Montana History Foundation. We've connected to them. And when they're doing this, they're not going to be an AERP volunteer necessarily. They're going to be volunteering with the History Foundation on these walks.
Great, thank you. I know we're coming up to time. And
Yes.
so if you have any additional things you want to share, please put them in the chatter in the portal, or send them to Deborah and I, and we'll put them in the chatter, because we know that there's great ideas in every state. And we know that our volunteers are being engaged by the state offices in a variety of levels. And we just want to thank all of you for coming today and for sharing your ideas. And Nancy, especially, thank you so much for just getting our thoughts focused on what you're doing in Montana and how that can apply to any of our states. Deborah, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, and thank you, Mary, for handling that segment wonderfully. Nancy, again, I thank you for agreeing to do this. And I also want to thank Mr. Stoner, who has made an offer to people that I hope you take him up on, because it's a way to, you know, bring a little more activity in different ways, a chance to try some different things. And, you know, I know most of us have plenty of things to do, but maybe if we get a chance to try something else, we'll find something that encourages our volunteers to stay even more engaged. So thank you all very much for your attention. Like I said, this recording will be in the chatter group, Miss Nancy's presentation, and anything else that you folks want to share, we'll do that. So thank you very much and have a great day.
Thank you all for coming. See you next month.
You're welcome. Have a good day, everybody.
Thank you. Deborah, you want to stop the recording?
Well, sure. Now.